with the cold pistol within his shaking grasp. He aims at the feeble man. He's scared. No, he's terrified. But mostly because he doesn't want to be the one responsible for the young girl's death. Would you kill to save a life? He has to do this, no way out. For their safety, not his. He doesn't want to pull the trigger, but he knows that if he doesn't, the girls will suffer. They'll meet their untimely demise. He is aware that these men keep their word he knows all too well. Their cries surround them, carving through his chest and digging into his heart. If the option was to take his own life instead, he'd have surrendered and let them live. Sadly, this isn't the option, and he only has one way to keep the girls and their mother safe. He knows they won't survive, even if he died. The constant weeping, wailing, and screaming has his ears ringing and merely reminding him of what was happening. The gun is heavy in his hands as he tightens his grip. He can't stop the tears from flowing from his eyes, wishing he could just run as fast as he could and somehow get away from all of this. He's just 8 years old, and here he stands before an innocent man about to pull the trigger as his own family watches in sheer terror. Seconds feel like an eternity, and as he's smacked to the back of the head, he pulls the trigger, and the bang of the gun raises the panic within the small village. The sound cracks and spreads through the thin air, echoing for miles. He's never used a gun before. He was restricted and favoured his bow and nothing else. He hates the heavy feeling in his grasp, the cold sensation, and the simplistic way to handle it. He's frozen in immense horror, his eyes wide in shock as he stares at the gaping hole he's made in the man's head. Half of his face is caving in, and blood splutters from the cracks. Brain mass spills from the open wound, and his body thumps to the ground, lifeless. The scent of smoke blisters from the muzzle of the gun, still firmly in his grasp. "Headshot!" the captain cheers with a smack to Nikolai's back, happy with the outcome. "Well done, Nikolai!" It's the first time he's ever shown any pride in his action. Nikolai is frozen, shaking, and riddled in shock and disbelief. Tears slowly drop from his eyes and his jaw clenches. Swallowing as he finally lets out a breath, he doesn't dare look at the family. He can hear their cries of despair and sorrow. As he blinks slowly, he's soon thrown to the ground with a hard thud. "You fucking murderer!" The wife grapples Nikolai to the ground, dust hovering from the impact. She is saturated in pure rage and hatred, and she has every reason. Nikolai is too shattered to realise what is happening until her nails dig into his face, clawing at his right side. She doesn't hold back. She doesn't care that he's just a boy. She takes every ounce of pain and rage out on him. After all, he's the one who pulled the trigger. Digging her nails in, her hands shake from the pure rush of adrenaline that surges inside and ignites the beast within. Screaming at him and carving at the same side of his face, she's aiming for his eye. He turns his head, trying to fight back, but the blinding pain to the right side of his face has him disoriented and shaking with agony as blood pours from the fresh open wound. "I'm sorry," he finally manages to shout, and eventually the guards feel it is time that they pull her away from him. They throw the woman down to the ground and train their weapons on her. "Stay there," the captain calls out, watching her carefully as his eyes narrow on the blood that taints her hands, violently shaking from the shock. She just sits there and continues to scream, despair draining her. A cry erupts from Nikolai's mouth, emotions overwhelming him, and he's paralysed in pain. "I didn't want to," he cries out before he brings his hands up and holds his face, feeling the warm liquid that paints his face and stings with each movement. Sobbing loudly, he can hear his heart sinking. He can't believe he's done it. He's just murdered someone. An innocent man. Raising his little family. Now they'll grow up to remember the freak show of a murderer. They will grow up without their father. All thanks to him. He ruined their lives. He's a monster. "Come on!" The captain pulls Nikolai up by his wrist and yanks him to his feet, barely able to stand. Nikolai steps forwards only to drop and pound the ground with his knees. Unable to open his right eye, he winces and tries to breathe, but he's overtaken by pain that throbs and surges from the right side of his face and curves around his head.